55 is the number. On the line with us now, who is on the road again, he and Juliana Ormond. Of course, I'm talking about Watchmen in Action, R.C. Williams. R.C., where are you guys at today?
Hey, Chris, we are in Gainesville, Georgia. So we're northeast of Atlanta at the Turning Point Faith Forward Conference. This is a pastor's conference. Turning Point Faith, Charlie Kirk, that group, do an incredible job with these things. And they're putting on these series of pastors' conferences to get the church focused on equipping the culture. You know, we talk a lot about how believers, we've abdicated our role of leadership in the culture, and it's caused decay. Well, Charlie, like us and many others, are working to take that back. And I'll share this, Chris. There is a strong Florida, and in particular Central Florida, contingent here for this conference. There are about 2,000 people here. The session just ended for the day, but it is certainly impressive.
Are there a lot of young people there?
Yeah, you know, Chris, what's amazing with Charlie being in his 30s, he's really inspired that. There is a good amount of young people, obviously the young people who are involved with Turning Point Faith, but you see a lot of families, you see a lot of young families, and you see a lot of young people, preteens and early teens, super engaged, because Turning Point also has Turning Point Academy, so they're doing curriculum and education as well. They're engaged. I'm actually watching right now tables full of young people at the end of the session sitting around collaborating, talking, and planning, because the conference goes through about noon tomorrow.
And when did it start? Has it been going on since Monday?
Yeah, it actually started Tuesday afternoon. Chris, here's what's interesting. The idea here was to get pastors inspired and focused on doing what they need to do. You know, Charlie Kirk opened, and he also sat down and did an interview with Matt Walsh on stage on Tuesday night. And a recurring theme of this, along with Lucas Miles, who's actually in charge of the Turning Point Faith division now, he's a pastor out of Indiana. They talked a lot about the war on children, in particular the genital mutilation and these trans surgeries and this misdirection that's going on, and how this is something we need to be fighting back hard against. So it is good that we're having that discussion, but it is also important that there are the amount of young people that there are here to hear this conversation and understand that the generations that came before them are focused on making sure that they're safe, and that there's also something they can do to fight back against it.
And this conference is Gainesville, Georgia. Why Gainesville, Georgia?
You know, one of the pastors that speaks on these tours, Franklin Jansen, is actually the pastor of Free Church. There are 5 campuses in the Atlanta area, and the one in Gainesville, this is a beautiful facility. I need to send you guys pictures so that you can share them. They offered their church, which is very similar. If people are familiar with Faith Assembly, where we do a lot of events on the Salem side,
right.
This church is very much like Faith Assembly. Beautiful facility, lots of space, and it allows for lots of people to come together and to collaborate.
Okay. Now, you also, am I mistaken, but don't you have a podcast that you're on now? A broadcast?
Oh, yeah. So we're actually capturing a bunch of interviews while we're here, Chris. I actually just got done interviewing Vince Ellison. Now, people may remember Vince from the movie Uncle Tom 2. He was the one who very boldly came out and said that the Democrat Party is the party of evil and devils, and they've been destroying black communities for generations.
Right.
I had a chance to sit down with him, and this interview will actually drop this weekend. It was about 45 minutes. And
right.
We go down this road. We also had an opportunity to talk with Bishop Leon Benjamin, who's been heavily involved with the Trump administration on the faith side. And we had that conversation about what we can do as believers to help President Trump to move initiatives forward, and then some of the stuff that's coming down the pipe for 2026.
That'll be at the Watchmen in Action website?
Yeah, Chris. So people will be able to find everything. We will have the Watchmen Brief, which is our podcast. That will publish on Friday, and then We Are the Watchmen Weekly publishes on Saturday. Both of those features will be our interview with Vince Ellison. And if people go to watchmenaction.org, it's plural, watchmenaction.org, they'll find those this Friday and Saturday.
All right. And the RC and Juliana are constantly putting stuff up there. So can people subscribe there?
They absolutely can, Chris. We would love to support. If you go to watchmenaction.org, you can subscribe to the We Are the Watchmen weekly newsletter. You can also subscribe to Rip from the Headlines. You know, it's been 2 years since the Silicon Valley banking crisis, Chris, and we broke that down pretty accurately on this show and told people we would end up where we are today. They can subscribe to that as well. And then we did a Watchman Action training in Sarasota a couple of weeks ago. We're actually going back next week. If people want to get a look at the Watchman Action training and they'd like to schedule a training for their group or for their venue, they can do that at the website as well.
And, of course, you have the handbook.
Yes, we do. Watchman Action, Empowered to Act. This express pack, Chris, within 2 hours, we can have people in action ready to go on the issue that's most important to them. They will walk out, or even before they walk out, they will be able to succinctly tell their story, get people rallied around that issue, and know exactly who they need to talk to move the needle, as Juliana always says, on that issue. We get them going, and one of the goals, and I talked about this here today, I said, if we do a training and we have people actually take action before they leave, they are more inclined to continue it than if we just train them and let them go. So taking action while you're learning is critical, and the Watchman Action training does that.
Tell us about some of the subject matters being discussed at this conference.
Yeah, Chris. So it's a very interesting and dynamic mix of speakers. We've had some great panels today where the discussion is around doctrine. And one of the prevailing themes, in addition to the war on young people, is that people need to drop the denominational splits. And the church needs to come together as a whole, because ultimately, if Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, and you believe in the sacrifice and the resurrection that he made on your behalf, then we need to be working together to retake territory in the culture. Chris, that theme has been very strong at this conference, and I'll share this quickly. Pastor Alan Jackson, who is out of Nashville, he does national TV shows and stuff like that. He said something on stage this afternoon that stuck with me. He said, I take full accountability that my generation is the one that is responsible for the biggest drop in church activity in the history of the church, and I'm here today to declare that that's over, and we're going to empower the next generation to get back to business for the kingdom. Chris, there's been so much transparency, whether it was Charlie Kirk himself talking about his concerns and fears around what's happening and how we fix it, or Matt Walsh, he did the movie What is a Woman, and the whole thing about am I racist? You know, he's done these movies that are funny, but he spoke very seriously. I think he's got like 6 kids. And he talked about his concerns and how important. He said, look, the church is the backstop. Rob McCoy, who was Charlie Kirk's pastor and really kicked off Charlie Kirk speaking in churches, talked about that this morning. He said, this is our watch. If we don't do this now, it is over. We have a responsibility to drop the barriers on things that are foolish amongst us as the ecclesia and get together to get the job done. It's been inspiring, Chris, and I often don't say that. When I go to these conferences, like most people do, you're kind of like, great, I saw a speaker or whatever. There is a sense of urgency at this conference that I have not seen before, or at least in the last 10 years of doing anything. There's a sense of urgency right now that's very different, and it's very refreshing.
All right. Well, once again, you can catch the podcast. This, you said, dropping Friday, and another one drops Saturday. And both of them you can find at watchmanaction.org. And please do subscribe when you are there, watchmanaction.org. So we'll have a safe trip back.
Appreciate you guys, Chris. Thank you.
All right. We appreciate you, R.C. Williams. All right. By the way, Alan Jackson